Welcome everybody to episode 11. I was going to say episode 10, but this is 11 of our French Revolution series, Revolution. So once again, we're here, we're getting closer and closer to the end of the series, episode 11. Now, picture Paris in the spring of 1793. It was a city pulsing with defiance and danger. The guillotine shadow looms large after Louis Capet's death, King Louis XVI, therefore sending shockwaves through Europe's monarchy, who now rally their armies against this upstart republic and the revolutionaries themselves. Inside the National Convention, the air crackles with tensions. Girondins on one side clutching at moderation, while the Montagnards, backed by the fiery sans-culottes, push for radical change. Meanwhile, the streets of Paris are filled with a new kind of power. Universal male suffrage has given the humblest workers a voice, and they're not afraid to use it. From the ashes of the old regime, a revolutionary tribunal rises, promising swift justice for traitors. But the Committee of Public Safety steps in to hold the line, and when the sans-culottes, led by the untamed Marat, storm the convention itself, the stage is set for a showdown that will reshape France. So buckle up for a wild ride through a revolution teetering on the edge, where every choice could mean triumph or collapse. The news of the king's execution spread across Europe like the thunderous roar of a storm. The monarchies of England, the Netherlands, Spain, and Portugal joined Austria in waging war against the Republic, which had dared to execute its monarch. These alarming wartime scenarios further heightened tensions within the National Convention. Since the execution of Louis XVI, a divide had opened among the deputies. On the right, the Girondins, named after the department from which many of them hailed, including Brissot, Roland, and Rabot-Saint-Étienne. They defended the king and were hostile to the influence of the Paris Commune. On the left, the Montagnards, named after their seat at the top of the Assembly Hall, were led by figures like Marat, Danton, and Robespierre. They aligned themselves with the more radical elements of the Parisian population and were not hesitant to denounce their opponents, often with violent rhetoric. In this atmosphere of intense political tension, Paris was experimenting with a new form of democracy, utilizing universal male suffrage for the first time to renew the leadership of these sections. Now more than ever, revolutionary France was ahead of its time. Almost 4 years after the storming of the Bastille in 1789, the humblest workers of Paris could taste the thrill of retribution. In the sections, political leaders now had to contend with the newfound power of the people, a volatile force that could not easily be ignored. As the political struggle within the National Convention grew more intense, many sections demanded the creation of a revolutionary tribunal. This proposal met fierce opposition from the Girondins, but its popularity among the Parisian sections and radical deputies ultimately pushed the convention toward adopting more extreme measures. Deputy Jacques Danton became the spokesperson for the citizens' demands. Deputy Jacques Danton became the spokesperson of the citizens' demands. During the sessions of the convention, and although the issue of the Revolutionary Tribunal was at the forefront of everyone's mind, I realized that we were about to leave without thoroughly discussing the matter. It was impossible for the sections of Paris not to demand its creation, so I spoke forcefully to compel the convention to take a stance. I declared, somewhat theatrically, I ordered every loyal citizen to remain in their place. It is important to establish judicial instruments that punish counter-revolutionaries, ensuring that tribunals replace the chaotic vengeance of the people. And I added, we must be terrible, so the people do not have to be. A revolutionary tribunal to judge those who defied the revolution and were seen as enemies of the state was officially established in March 1793. This tribunal was an essential step in consolidating the power of the revolution, and its mission was to execute swift justice against traitors and counter-revolutionaries. The tribunal would be supported by surveillance committees established in each section of Paris and every municipality in the country. These committees would be tasked with monitoring citizens, gathering intelligence, and ensuring that the revolution's enemies would be identified and punished. Well, as you may think, the atmosphere had shifted, and now every citizen had to account for their actions. The growing rift between Republicans and former monarchists quickly escalated into a civil war. This civil conflict reached its peak with the outbreak of an armed insurrection in the Vendée during the spring of 1793. The rural population of the Vendée rose up against the convention's order to draft 300,000 men for the war effort. However, the roots of the conflict ran deeper than just conscription. They were rooted in the religious devotion of the poorer peasants, who feared that the revolution would strip them of their church and religious freedoms. This anger was skillfully manipulated by royalist officers, turning what started as a peasant revolt into a full-fledged political struggle. On one side stood the royalists and counter-revolutionary Catholics, represented by the color white, the traditional color of the monarchy. On the other, the Republicans, symbolized by blue, the color of the revolution. The Vendée conflict became one of the most bitter and violent of the revolution, forcing the Republicans to fight not only from external enemies, but also a growing internal uprising. With the Republicans stretched thin across multiple fronts, both external and internal, the sections of Paris soon found themselves disoriented and overwhelmed by fatigue and racked with doubt, as though the revolution was losing its momentum. In response to these dire challenges, on April 6, 1793, the National Convention established the Committee of Public Safety, a new body tasked with overseeing the war effort and ensuring the survival of the revolution. 12 men, chosen monthly from the deputies, were tasked with steering the country's direction in these volatile times. The ongoing conflict between the Girondins and Montagnards became increasingly violent and fraught with tension. In a calculated attempt to weaken and marginalize their political rivals, the Girondins deputies sought to bring the most radical Montagnards, the fiery journalist Jean-Paul Marat, before the Revolutionary Tribunal. The sans-culottes of Paris were against the Girondins for their perceived cowardice. When we judged the king, we wanted them removed because we supported the sans-culottes. The Girondins had the audacity to accuse me before the Revolutionary Tribunal. Naturally, I prevailed, and the sans-culottes carried me out in triumph, Marat later claimed. But when thousands of sans-culottes cheered for Marat's victory, the Girondin deputies found the political tides turning sharply against them. The situation quickly became dangerous for the Girondins. In response, 35 out of 48 sections of Paris officially called for the removal of the most prominent Girondins deputies. The insurrectionary Commune of Paris became the epicenter of this growing unrest, with Marat taking to the streets to incite further action. He urged the people to mobilize, declaring, "Arise, sovereign people of France! Go to the convention with your demands. Refuse to leave until you have obtained satisfaction." On June 2, 1793, in response to Marat's calls for actions, the sections of Paris, bolstered by battalions of the Paris Guard, seized control of the National Convention, effectively taking the assembly hostage. With cannons trained on the hall, the deputies were forced to remain inside until they conceded to the demands of the sans-culottes. Under this pressure, the assembly voted to arrest 29 leading deputies of the Gironde, the Girondins. This marked a decisive moment in the revolution, as the Girondins, once the dominant political force, were rapidly losing power. In the wake of this victory, the citizens of Paris celebrated their triumph with an unprecedented surge of revolutionary fervor. The National Convention, now firmly in the hands of the sans-culottes, adopted a new Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. This new declaration boldly recognized the right of individuals to resist oppression and promised education and assistance to all citizens, a promise of greater equality and justice. In defense of these newly recognized rights, the sans-culottes were resolute. Across every district of Paris, they were prepared to unleash fierce struggle against anyone who dared challenge the revolution and the republic. The power of the people, once again, was absolute. The revolution didn't just topple a king. It reshaped the meaning of time, power, and identity itself. With the execution of Louis XVI and the declaration of Year One, France had severed its ties to the past. But for the sans-culottes and the revolutionaries, the fight was far from over. The road ahead would be marked by war, terror, and the relentless pursuit of an ideal. Liberty, equality, and fraternity, no matter the cost. As we've seen, the execution of the king was only the beginning. In the months that followed, revolutionary France would wage war on every front against foreign armies, against rebels, and against itself. The power of the people had reshaped politics, but it had also unleashed forces that no one could fully control, as new institutions like the Revolutionary Tribunal and the Committee of Public Safety rose to prominence. The revolution's promise of liberty was increasingly defended by the sword, and for France, the most turbulent days still lay ahead. Well, I hope you're really enjoying this series, and I will see you next time to episode 12. Bye.